Learning objectives. At the end of this topic, you will be able to interpret the significance of sexual mode of reproduction, illustrate reproductive parts of a flower, and explain their role in sexual reproduction. Explain the process of reproduction in human beings. Describe male and female reproductive system of human beings. Summarize the role of testes, ovaries, and the germ cells. Realize the significance of reproductive health. Introduction. Sexual reproduction. Why the sexual mode of reproduction? The creation of two new cells from one involves copying of the DNA as well as that of the cellular apparatus. The DNA copying mechanism cannot be absolutely accurate, and the resultant errors are a source of variation in population of organisms. Every individual organism cannot be protected by variations, but in a population, variations are useful for ensuring the survival of the species. While DNA copying mechanisms are not absolutely accurate, they're precise enough to make the generation of variation a fairly slow process. Each new variation is made in a DNA copy that already has variations accumulated from previous generations. Thus, two different individuals in a population would have quite different patterns of accumulated variations. Since all of these variations are in living individuals, it is assured that they do not have any really bad effects. Combining variations from two or more individuals would thus create new combinations of variants. Many multicellular organisms have special lineages of cells and specialized organs which have only half the number of chromosomes and half the amount of DNA as compared to the non-reproductive body cells. Thus, when these germ cells from two individuals combine during sexual reproduction to form a new individual, it results in re-establishment of the number of chromosomes and the DNA content in the new generation. If the zygote is to grow and develop into an organism which has highly specialized tissues and organs, then it has to have sufficient stores of energy. In very simple organisms, it is seen that two germ cells are not very different from one another and may even be similar. But as the body designs become more complex, the germ cells also specialize. One germ cell is large and contains the food stores, while the other is smaller and is likely to be motile. Sexual reproduction in flowering plants. The reproductive parts of the angiosperms are located in the flower. Stamens and carpels are the reproductive parts of a flower which contain the germ cells. The flower may be unisexual, papaya, watermelon, when it contains either stamens or carpels, or bisexual, hibiscus, mustard, when it contains both stamens and carpels. Stamen is the male reproductive part and it produces pollen grains that are yellowish in color. Carpel is present in the center of a flower and is the female reproductive part. It's made up of three parts. The swollen bottom part is the ovary, middle elongated part is the style, and the terminal part, which may be sticky, is the stigma. The ovary contains ovules and each ovule has an egg cell. The male germ cell produced by the pollen grain fuses with the female gametes present in the ovule. This fusion of the germ cells, or fertilization, gives us the zygote which is capable of growing into a new plant. Thus, the pollen needs to be transferred from the stamen to the stigma. If this transfer of pollen occurs in the same flower, it's referred to as self-pollination. On the other hand, if the pollen is transferred from one flower to another, it's known as cross-pollination. This transfer of pollen from one flower to another is achieved by agents like wind, water, or animals. After the pollen lands on a suitable stigma, it has to reach the female germ cells, which are in the ovary. For this, a tube grows out of the pollen grain and travels through the style to reach the ovary. After fertilization, the zygote divides several times to form an embryo within the ovule. The ovule develops a tough coat and is gradually converted into a seed. The ovary grows rapidly and ripens to form a fruit. The seed contains the future plant or embryo, which develops into a seedling under appropriate conditions. This process is known as germination. Reproduction in human beings. We can notice that changes take place in human beings. For example, thick hair on the face of boys appears as a few scattered hairs first, and only slowly does the growth begin. That is, these entire changes take place slowly over a period of months and years. In some people, they happen early and quickly, while in others, they can happen very slowly. Also, each change does not become complete quickly either. Also, we have different patterns of hair growth or size and shape of breast or penis. All of these changes are aspects of the sexual maturation of the body. The creation of germ cells to participate in sexual reproduction is another specialized function. However, while the body of the individual organism is growing to its adult size, the resources of the body are mainly directed at achieving this growth. While that is happening, the maturation of the reproductive tissue is not likely to be a major priority. Thus, as the rate of general body growth begins to slow down, reproductive tissues begin to mature. This period during adolescence is called puberty. We must remember that the sexual mode of reproduction means germ cells from two individuals have to join together. This can happen by the external release of germ cells from the bodies of individuals, as it happens in the flowering plants. Or it can happen by two individuals joining their bodies together for internal transfer of germ cells for fusion, as it happens in many animals. Male reproductive system. The male reproductive system consists of portions which produce the germ cells and other portions that deliver the germ cells to the site of fertilization. The formation of germ cells or sperms takes place in the testes. These are located outside the abdominal cavity in the scrotum because sperm formation requires a lower temperature than the normal body temperature. In addition to regulating the formation of sperms, testosterone brings about changes in appearance seen in boys at the time of puberty. The sperms formed are delivered through the vas deferens, which unites with a tube coming from the urinary bladder. The urethra thus forms a common passage for both the sperm and the urine. Along the path of the vas deferens, glands like the prostate and the seminal vesicles add their secretions, so that the sperms are now in a fluid which makes their transport easier, and this fluid also provides nutrition. The sperms are tiny bodies that consist of mainly genetic material and a long tail that helps them to move towards the female germ cell. Female reproductive system. The female germ cells or eggs are made in the ovaries. They are also responsible for the production of some hormones. When a girl is born, the ovaries already contain thousands of immature eggs. On reaching puberty, some of these start maturing. One egg is produced every month by one of the ovaries. The egg is carried from the ovary to the womb through a thin oviduct or fallopian tube. The two oviducts unite into an elastic bag-like structure known as the uterus. The uterus opens into the vagina through the cervix. The sperms enter through the vaginal passage during sexual intercourse. They travel upwards and reach the oviduct, where they may encounter the egg. The fertilized egg, the zygote, gets implanted in the lining of the uterus and starts dividing. The uterus prepares itself every month to receive and nurture the growing embryo. The lining thickens and is richly supplied with blood to nourish the growing embryo. The embryo gets nutrition from the mother's blood with the help of a special tissue called the placenta. This is a disc which is embedded in the uterine wall. It contains villi on the embryo side of the tissue. On the mother's side are blood spaces which surround the villi. This provides a large surface area for glucose and oxygen to pass from the mother to the embryo. The developing embryo will also generate waste substances which can be removed by transferring them into the mother's blood through the placenta. The development of the child inside the mother's body takes approximately 9 months. The child is born as a result of rhythmic contractions of the muscles in the uterus. What happens when the egg is not fertilized? If the egg is not fertilized, it lives for about 1 day. Since the ovary releases 1 egg every month, the uterus also prepares itself every month to receive a fertilized egg. Thus, its lining becomes thick and spongy. This would be required for nourishing the embryo if fertilization had taken place. Now, however, this lining is not needed any longer. So, the lining slowly breaks and comes out through the vagina as blood and mucus. This cycle takes place roughly every month and is known as menstruation. It usually lasts for about 2 to 8 days. Reproductive health. We must also consider the possible health consequences of having sex. Since the sexual act is a very intimate connection of bodies, it is not surprising that many diseases can be sexually transmitted. These include bacterial infections such as gonorrhea and syphilis, and viral infections such as warts and HIV/AIDS. This can be prevented by using a covering called a condom for the penis during sex, which helps to prevent transmission of many of these infections to some extent. The sexual act always has the potential to lead to pregnancy. Pregnancy will make major demands on the body and the mind of the woman, and if she is not ready for it, her health will be adversely affected. Therefore, many ways have been devised to avoid pregnancy. Summary. Let's summarize the topic. Today we have learned that female reproductive system in human beings consists of ovaries, uterus, fallopian tubes, and vagina. The male reproductive system in human beings consists of testes, which produce sperms, seminal vesicles, vas deferens, urethra, prostate gland, and penis. Changes in the body at puberty, such as increase in the breast size in girls and new facial hair growth in boys, are signs of sexual maturation. Pollination refers to reproduction in flowering plants, involves transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma.